Hi there. We're here to talk about The Fall of Hyperion today by Dan Simmons. His follow up to Hyperion, which was a Hugo Award winner. I haven't read this book
Hmm.
yet, but my son Zach has. Zach, any initial reaction?
My feelings changed drastically about two-thirds of the way through.
Hmm. Now that's intriguing. Of course, you haven't said if that was good or bad yet, but we'll get to that. We are Fantasy for the Ages, the show where a father and son talk about fantasy, science fiction, and other nerdy things we enjoy. Thanks for joining us today. This is a spoiler-light review of The Fall of Hyperion. So if you haven't read it, we're not going to ruin it for you. I haven't read it yet, so Zach is not going to ruin it for me. But he's going to give us his thoughts, his reactions, and a general idea of maybe what the story kind of is about. But again, not ruining the plot. So, were you enjoying it more before you hit two-thirds and then or the other way around? I mean, tell me more.
Generally the other way around. I started reading this book not necessarily excited, but knowing I needed to read it to finish out the story from the first book
Okay.
because I was down to find out where it was going, what the conclusion was, but I wasn't like super invested or caring about the story. It left in the middle of finally getting to action in the end of the first book. And so knowing the world, I was like, I would like to see how this ends. I don't know if
Now,
I'm going to like it, but I'd like to see how it ends.
now let me ask again, harkening back to your coverage of Hyperion. You described it primarily as a group of people traveling together and they're each telling their own stories, their
Yeah.
backstories. And you found those stories really interesting. But the actual framework of them journeying somewhere, that was the least interesting part of the
Some
book.
of the stories were more interesting than others, and I thought it was a very interesting way to world build that way because it worked to slowly figure out what was going on through the stories. But therefore, I only knew enough about the world to actually understand what they were doing in the actual modern timeline after I was like two-thirds through.
Okay. So here this book picks up where they've arrived where they're going or something?
Kind of. It does. However, it picks up completely elsewhere with a completely different character who is, for some reason, aware of what's going on there in a way that seems like it shouldn't make sense, but does. And it's like, okay. Part of what we were thinking throughout the entire last book was predicated on the fact that these people that we're now seeing didn't exactly know what was going on. What now they do. Okay. So there's something more going on here. And we're seeing the other side, the modern day component, while still jumping back and getting what's going on with those travelers. Do I care? Like, is any of this actually interesting or compelling? And then about two-thirds of the way through, we finally kind of let the shoe drop and go,
Okay.
hey, this is actually the bad guy. I know we've been saying it's this, and we've been hinting it's this, but we've also been telling you, no, it's not really this. But now we're telling you, no, it actually is this. We were lying to you every time we said, no, it's not this. And we were lying badly. But like now we're committing to it. And here's why. And that's where it actually got interesting. Like none of
Ah.
the lying about them being the bad guy or people not realizing they were the bad guy or people realizing it but pretending they didn't know anyways, none of that I cared about. But when we got to, okay, but why? What's going on behind the scenes? And to an extent, and this is where it's going to get a little confusing, what will go on behind the scenes that makes this interesting? Because there is a portion of this book, a function in this book that deals with time travel. We
Oh.
already kind of knew that going into it. We didn't experience it exactly, but we knew it existed, or at least it will exist. And again, we're seeing a little bit the why.
So is this fantasy or is this science fiction?
Science fantasy.
Okay.
It's solidly science fiction. But some of it gets so far out there that it's like,
Science fiction
Is that
fantasy.
fantasy? Like, let's just go a step. Is Dune science fiction? Yes. But some of that is so inconceivably science fiction that it's fantasy. That's where this is falling in.
This
There are
falls
some
into a
things,
similar camp. Okay.
as well as there are some more abstract theoretical things that are done for more of a like poetry or beauty element. And so it's like, you know that that's not real and physical, but it's how they're describing something anyways. Except maybe it's so not real and physical that we've given it physical form. The one thing I will say this has done for me is give me the answer to a New York Times puzzle that was about a poet because I knew his name was Keats.
Ah, okay.
But also, I should probably go read some John Keats because I imagine if you've read Keats and enjoy Keats, you'll love this series so much better
Oh, okay.
because
I'm
John
not
Keats is
really a
pivotal.
poetry person so much.
I couldn't tell you much of anything
I've read some
about.
poetry. I'm like,
Well, I like poetry. I couldn't tell you much of anything about Keats' poetry.
okay.
Maybe I
So
should.
the original book, Hyperion, won the Hugo for the best novel of that year in fantasy and science fiction. The
Mm-hmm.
Fall of Hyperion, its sequel, did not win a Hugo.
Yeah.
I don't even remember if it was even nominated. But would you agree it's not as good as the original?
Um,
Or is it just kind of on the same level?
the
Or
I
is it
would
better?
argue Hyperion kind of like deserved a Hugo for being unique in how it told the story.
Okay.
That element. And that element is gone. The Fall of Hyperion is a little bit more traditionally told. It still has some weird things, but it's not the same like method vehicle of giving all this information to us and isn't something that is jarringly new.
Okay. Got it. But you definitely enjoyed it then? You're glad you read it? At least the last third?
I'm glad I read it. I generally enjoyed it. I don't know if I am going to go read the continuation of.
Yeah, technically this is a quartet. There are
Yeah,
two
it's a
more books.
quartet with a like two duologies.
Right. So this is a stopping point. You can just stop here if you want.
I believe the next one has a huge time jump or something, and
And you hate those.
maybe I could enjoy it and would be interested, but I also this wrapped the story it was telling enough that I'm content being like, this was interesting. There are some certain elements that I enjoyed and think are compelling to carry over into other works or steal from or whatever. But is it going to rank up in my favorite books ever? Probably not.
Okay. There it is. Well, thanks for sharing. These are in my TBR, though I think they're far enough down I may not get to them yet in 2024.
That's okay.
There's so much to read. It's not like Red Rising. I mean, I gotta get
That
there.
you need to get to ASAP.
Okay. But you wouldn't discourage people from checking this out sometime when they're wanting to try something different.
No, I wouldn't discourage it. I would say if you have a hard time getting into the first, that's totally valid. You won't have the same problem with the second, but you might not enjoy it as much by the time you've finished both of them.
And there you've got it, straight from Zach. His feeling on the Fall of Hyperion. If you liked this episode, don't forget to tell us by clicking the like button. We really appreciate that. And if you haven't subscribed, we would love to see you be one of our subscribers. Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll talk to you next time.